Welcome to another episode of Not Your Average Lives. And today it's just me talking about authenticity. And this came about because I just interviewed one of my students yesterday. Her episode's going to come out on Monday, the 25th of January. And I wanted to give a little pre warm up training, I guess, if you will, about what we're going to talk about in her episode because she was living inauthentically. And a lot of us don't even realize we're doing that. We don't want to live inauthentic. We want to live as we really are, as who we really are. And many of us don't even realize that we're walking around wearing a mask, as my now friend Alex Paulos talks about. He's somebody I had as a guest on my podcast a while back. So, and I'll put his episode number in the show notes. I also refer to it when I'm talking to Nancy in her episode. But he is able to tell, he does this personality typing, and he's able to tell just through looking at pictures and seeing a video of you if you're living inauthentically or operating in self-deception is the way he calls it. And he talks about this mask that we wear, and some of us don't wear it all the time. We only wear it in certain situations, but some of us wear it a lot of the time. And it's not good to do that because it takes us away from who we really are and are meant to be. And it isn't the way we should operate because we were born to be who we really are. And our soul needs us to be expressed in its original state, and so we need to show up as the person that we were sent here to be. And many of us let society and our situation and our circumstances kind of suppress that. And I've done it in my past. And, it's not like, I'm living fully authentically every single moment, every single day, because I think there's times when we're in situations where sometimes we're afraid. It's a fear-based thing where I'm like, I can't be myself because these people won't accept me. Acceptance is a big part of it. So it's just an awareness that I now have. So it's a reminder that I now have this knowledge to check in. Like, is what am I? How am I acting? Who am I being? Am I being the real Lori, or I'm trying to be somebody I'm not? So it's very easy sometimes to slip into trying to be accepted, trying to not rock the boat, and those things are okay for small moments in time, but we can't operate like that the majority of the time. We just can't because we won't be happy. So I'm going to talk about, I have three things where, kind of situations why we would do this and why we would put our masks on, and then the consequences of what living inauthentically will do. And we get into it with Nancy and what happened to her. Her story is pretty incredible because she had some major physical issues, health issues from not showing up as the real Nancy. Do you remember that? It was that the will the real so and so show up or stand up? Will the real so and so stand up? That was a show in the olden days. I'm showing my age now, but they would talk during the show. It was like a game show, and they would bring these three people in, and each one would give this really great background. And so they, first of all, before the show even started, they would say, "This is Clark Kent," for example, just using that name for example. And Clark is a businessman, and he goes to work, and he is a stockbroker, and he blah blah blah. And so they give this little summary of who this like guy is. So you have his bio, and then you meet these three people, and they come in and they tell you a little bit about, and there's a panel, and they can interview these people, and they give answers. And usually the best liar wins, and it's so funny to see like who the real one is. I would love to know if you remember that. Do you remember that? It was a little bit, I mean, I was really young when it was on, but I do remember that show. um so I have to figure out what the name of that was. It's escaping me at the moment, but I'll put it in the show notes. I'll Google it and put it in the show notes. All right, so the three things, or the three ways in which we can tell like maybe if it's happening to us, is that one is we seek to please others. So if you're a people pleaser, then you need to be on the lookout for whether you are wearing a mask a lot of the times. So we please others because, we want other people to be happy, right? And I think moms do that a lot because they want their kids to be happy, and sometimes they lose sight of themselves. And it's not that they're not showing up as the person they're meant to be, but they're not maybe showing up doing the things. They're not showing up like maybe they've misplaced that the work they're meant to do in the world is suppressed because they think their purpose is their mom. I talk about this a lot because that's what I thought, and it wasn't until my kids grew up and went away, and then I was like, "What? What the what?" And so, in a way, I wasn't living authentically because, I was so focused on being a mom. So where's that Lori, and what does she love to do, and what does she enjoy? But we make others happy at the expense of our own happiness. So we can't our entire life can't be lived based on other people's happiness. That will leave us high and dry. If you're the last person left on earth and you don't have those people around you anymore, would you be happy? Would that be well, I'm a people person, so I probably wouldn't be happy in that case. Let's hope it never happens. But what if you were placed somewhere in a new city, in a new town, and you didn't have those connections that you have now? Could you operate and be happy because you have a reason for being, because you love things that you do and you go do them wherever you are? So if you're just trying to please others that are around you and it's sucking you dry, you're not living authentically. It's a hard word to say. So a couple of ways I know that I did that was, I was making money because my mom said I needed to make money. And so I wanted to do a job that wasn't going to make a lot of money. And she said, "Oh, no, you can't do that because you're not going to make money." So I operated with this identity that wasn't necessarily natural or something that came naturally to me. It was something that I kind of did because I did do because my mom said, "You're not going to make money doing that." And money is important. Money is important. Even though she was a teacher, she said, "Money is important." And so, okay, money was important to me, but it wasn't really important to me. It was more important to my mother. And it was also important to my first husband, who was a police officer. Isn't it funny how these people who don't make a lot of money is important to them? So it became important to me. And so I ended up getting a job and, you know, working my way up the corporate ladder and making lots of money. And one day I remember living in this 11,000 square foot house and with 4-car garage. And I remember how unhappy I was. And that's when it dawned on me that I don't want to live here. I don't want to live in this house. It's not making me happy. That was inauthentic. That was inauthentic. Moving into a house with 9.5 bathrooms that I couldn't even go to the bathroom in all of them in one day because it was my mother's and my ex-husband's desire. Money was important to them, and and those kind of things. Even though my mother, well, we did have a pool in our backyard. I talk about this in one of my trainings about like your money mindset, and they were always like living paycheck to paycheck. But we did have nice things, for from the outside. We did have nice things, but it was always like they lived on a lot of credit card debt, I believe, and they didn't save any money for retirement, and that's a whole nother story. But so I kind of, not kind of, I did make choices early in my life that weren't really authentic to who I really was. Another example would be like a family business. So maybe I see this happening where people are expected to go into the family business. You know, men love having sons because they'll take over the business, right? That's kind of like how in the old days, that's what happened. A man would have a grocery store. He'd start a grocery store, and then his son would take over the grocery store when he got too old to manage the grocery store or a hardware store. It's kind of like the family business. So, what if that child had something else that they wanted to do, completely different? What if they wanted to be a sculptor, not run a grocery store? That would be living inauthentically, becoming the owner of the grocery store and taking over. And so that's really hard to get, I think, in that dynamic of, oh, it's like, just you're just that's expected. You're going to take over whatever I give you. A lot of us, we end up doing what our parents did. Is that really what we want to do, or is that just it was modeled for us, so it's kind of a known quantity? But is that really what we want to do? My parents were teachers, and so what courses did I take in college? English. I was good English education major. I was going to be a teacher. But then I found out I hated it, and I didn't like the classes I went to, and I even had a chance to substitute teach, which I didn't like at all. So I went at just that was not my cup of tea. Fortunately, I realized that, and went another route, even though that might have not been the perfect route either. So we want to please others is one reason that we wear a mask. Another reason is we feel we need to act a certain way to like be accepted. We want to be accepted. One of the basic human needs is to be accepted, to feel worthy. And so we wear a mask to adapt. It's a society thing oftentimes. You want to adapt as a child. It's like the cool kids. You want to hang out with the cool kids or sit at the cool kids table, right? And this has to do with things like religion. When you are born into a religion, but yet as you grow up and you learn other things, it's like, well, you can't believe that because you were raised this way. You have to be a Catholic, or you have to be. I went to a Mormon church for most of my church time has been spent in a Mormon church, because when I was in high school, I fell in love with a Mormon boy, and my parents didn't go to church, and his family did. And so I was like, well, I'll just go to church with him. And I loved it. I loved it. Fortunately, my parents didn't care. But can you imagine if parents were really ingrained in their religion and they were strong Catholics, and I elected to go to a Mormon church instead of a Catholic church? That could have created a lot of problems. And I probably wouldn't have gone to the Mormon church because I would have wanted to adapt and please, right? So it's so interesting how we will do things that maybe don't feel right inside, or that we don't want to, but it's more important for us to be accepted. This also comes up with who you love. If you think about if you've ever known somebody who's gay or had a family member who is gay or transgender. I have a nephew who's transgendered, so I've seen this firsthand of how this can play out in a family. Fortunately, my family was always very accepting of we always wanted people to be happy, even though my mother told me to make money. She still wanted me to be happy. She thought that would make me happy. So we want the people we love to ultimately to be happy, right? But sometimes we can't have that. We can't. That doesn't make sense for ourselves, because we also think we know what they think, right? So we think, well, they won't accept that person. Like interracial marriages, it's another thing. A lot of people are super judgmental about, like, if you marry somebody outside of your race. So we don't marry who we're supposed to marry, or love who we're supposed to love, or who inside we love, but we stop ourselves. Because this happened with me, but it didn't have anything to do with being gay or interracial issues. I loved somebody and I married somebody else because, and the other person, well, and again, that was my choice and my decision. It wasn't any family pressure that caused that, but I was inauthentic. I was being inauthentic because I told myself that that's a person that will be a good father, that person will be a good husband, but inside I love somebody else. So how is that authentic when you know inside you love somebody else and you're marrying this person. And I loved the person I was marrying too, but I knew there was something not right. I knew there was something not right. And when you know, when you have a feeling that something's not right, you're showing up inauthentically. And divorce is another thing. So we act a certain way because we want to be accepted. And divorce falls into this because I came from a legacy of no divorces. So my parents, their parents, uh, my everybody that in my life, except my dad had some sisters who had been divorced, but we didn't live near them, so my all my role models never got divorced, so I can't get divorced. So, and I lived so long talking myself out of something that would have brought me closer to who I was really and how I should live, who I should be, who should I be in this world. I wasn't living my truth by denying that which was coming up for me. So, and then the third thing was we don't want to rock the boat. Who wants conflict? We don't want conflict, right? So, and conflict can come anywhere, like divorce. Sure, that creates conflict. Speaking up for what you want and saying, I can't be in this marriage anymore, that's going to rock the boat, probably. If somebody that you're married to doesn't, very, very seldom is it like, yeah, I do too. Let's do that. So, the boss, you don't want to rock, say you're in a job that is like sucking your soul, and that was Nancy's problem, which you'll find out on Monday. But you don't want your boss to be mad. You go to your boss and say, this job isn't working for me. Can I have another job? Or I quit. Like we don't want to like upset the apple cart, right? And then we have friends we work with, our coworkers. We'll miss them. They won't be in our life. We don't think about the new coworkers that might even be better, or a boss that might be better, or the company. We're like, oh, the company needs me. Oh, what will they do without me? But if it's robbing you of who you're supposed to be and who you are, and you're not feeling good about going into your job every day, there's something inauthentic about what you're doing. It's not the right job for you. So, and it doesn't mean you have to change everything overnight. You just need to start figuring it out. Like, what is it? What is going wrong with me? Why is and not that there's something wrong, but there's some kind of mask that you're putting on to go to that job every day. The money mask, the pleaser mask, the adapting mask, the don't upset the apple cart mask. So those are all ways in which we don't show up authentically. So the consequences are wide and far reaching. And I'm just going to refer to Nancy again. She had major health issues. And so health issues can crop up when you live inauthentically. So she was showing signs of adrenal fatigue, stress. She was basically a severe health crisis in her future. That's what was in store for her, a severe health crisis. So I had her go through this personality typing, which I have all my students do because it's been so valuable. I found it last summer and I've introduced it, and it's like a real game changer for many of my students. And they're not everybody's living like there's different degrees of self deception. But when you're in a severe extreme of living in deception, like Nancy was, it reaps very, very bad things on your body and your mind, your mindset. So what happens is not only health issues that crop up, back pain, like chronic pain, autoimmune disease problems, adrenal fatigue, like you produce too much cortisol. When you're living inauthentically, and we get into this a little bit, but basically what happens is you're kind of like in this fight or flight because you're trying to force something, right? You're so afraid of being who you really are. And so it's kind of this like internal fight to be a certain way, but it goes against the grain of who you're meant to be. So can you imagine what that does? Your soul knows you're not doing it right, but your ego and your mind, your logic brain is forcing you to be in this place. And so because the feelings of you feel if you're living authentically, you feel good. You feel aligned. You wake up in the morning, you have energy, you have focus, you have motivation. But when you aren't living authentically, you have a negative attitude usually, uh, and that creates negative energy. And when you have negative energy, the problem with negative energy, it's this vibe. Think about it. You ever met somebody and you're like, I like being around her. She's got such positive vibes. Well, that is true. Energy comes from people. We are made up of atoms and we produce energy. And we're not just these like big balls of flesh. So we actually have energy and we emanate energy, but it can be negative energy, it can be positive energy. And when you're not living authentically, then you are pushing out into the world that negativity. Even if you're not feeling like a negative person, it's just this like fight of that you're fighting, and it's not positive. It's really not positive. Even though you're making other people happy, you think, "Oh, I'm positive. I'm making other people happy." I was positive, but I was still living inauthentically, until I got more directed onto the path of where that was aligned with my soul's purpose in my mid 50s. And so, even though I was a positive person, that I had this inauthentic vibe. I think there where I wasn't where I wanted to be, and it created a lack of focus. It created lack of energy, motivation, lack of passion. That was a big one, lack of passion. And I thought it was because my marriage lacked passion, and it did. But if I showed up as a passionate person in my marriage, guess what? The marriage would be a lot more passionate. I was producing negative energy in that marriage. And, and I think back, my poor ex husband, he was receiving this misaligned soul every day in his life. He was dealing with this woman who wasn't living her true self, and therefore wasn't showing up in a way that made their lives better. I always look for how I contribute to a situation, and I take full responsibility with that. But I didn't know then what I know now about how we produce this energy, and if we're not aligned with who we're meant to be, then it attracts more of that. So we continue to get stuck, which is like so frustrating. So once you learn and understand, like, are you living in self-deception? How much are you living in self-deception? Is it 90% of the time? Is it 20% of the time? But finding yourself is such a gift, not only to yourself, but to the people around you. And I talk about this a lot because the ripple effect is so important. And this. The world needs positive energy. The world will be better with the more positive energy we can generate, the better off the world will be. And you think, well, I can't do so much. I'm just one person. But you're one person, and your positive energy can emanate to your spouse, can emanate to your children, can then emanate to your grandchildren if you're a grandmother, which many of my listeners are. And think about that. That can affect generations by just you stepping into who you're meant to be, really like digging in and understanding, am I living authentically or am I not? And start to just have an awareness of checking in with, what's my mood? How am I feeling? Is this something that I'm doing to please somebody? Is it something I'm doing to not rock the boat? Is it something that I'm doing to be accepted? Check in with all those things. Just be aware. Awareness. I love awareness. It's been done so much for me. Just understanding where your actions, what's the root of them, what's causing them. Is it because it makes you feel good and makes you happy? We end up making other people happy at our own expense, and we think, well, that's okay, I'll sacrifice myself so others can be happy. But you know what happens really is they're not happy when you're not happy. And so they know you're not happy. And so they can be happier if you're happy. So I always start from within, fill your cup, make sure you're living fully aligned with who you're meant to be, and take the risk. Because when we start to act from who we are instead of how we think other people's want us to act, it's like magic. It's like magic. Things unfold for us that we never realized were possible. People come into our life that we never would have met if we were continuing to send out that negative energy and live inauthentically. So that is my lesson for today. So I want you to walk out into the world and live who you're meant to be, who you were born to be before society and all these expectations stripped who we were supposed to be from us, and we lost sight of it. So make finding out who you are your number one priority, and have a great weekend because it's a Friday. Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Not Your Average Lives podcast. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe on iTunes if you have an Apple device. You can find free resources and learn what else I have going on at the moment that might interest you on my website at notyouraveragegrandma.com. You can also find me on Instagram or Facebook at Not Your Average Grandma. If you liked this episode, it would make my heart so happy if you could leave me a 5-star rating. You can also add a review to let me know what you like about this podcast, which will help spread the word about it to others who need a little midlife inspiration. As always, be you, listen to your inner voice, and focus on reigniting that lost spark so you can start living your own, not your average life.